thank you all for watching this presentation about Weaviate. So Weaviate is a vector database or an AI native vector database, and one of the focus areas that we have is on allowing people to create end-to-end AI native applications. And in this presentation, I'm going to talk about what that is, and I'm going to give a quick demo where you can see that. So we're going to talk about vector search. We're going to talk about retrieval augmented generation or RAG, and generative feedback loops. So let's dive right in. So a lot is happening in our space that I'm very proud of. So we are nearing the end of 2023, but it has been an amazing year. So I was very proud this year during Google I/O that when they released their models, they were so kind to feature Weaviate as well, but also from a more larger infrastructure perspective, people also start to appreciate what's happening. It really starts to become a new category in the space of infrastructure, these vector databases. So I'm super happy to talk more about them. So to start off, so what we believe is that the best AI applications are created by weaving together the database and the model. So the strong the better we can bring the database and the models together, the easier it becomes for you to create these kinds of applications. And Weaviate is open source, so that means that it allows our community of customers and users to use Weaviate any way, shape, or form that they want. So we have, of course, open source, we have containers, Kubernetes setup, embedded, but we also have serverless SaaS, we have bring your own cloud. So really depending on how you want to consume the database, we have that for you. And this enables you to create secure application. What we mean with secure in this context is when it's serverless, you might want to have SOC 2, or when you want to keep the data close, you want to bring your own cloud. Explainable. So what we mean with explainable is that every time you have you use a generative model, you can always say, okay, whatever was generated was based on this data. So it creates it's a form of explainable AI, and something that we call stateful. And what we mean with stateful is that the generative models are currently stateless. So if you ever use one of these models, it might sometimes reply with something like, I'm trained in, I don't know, 2021 or 2022. So I don't have access to this information. Or it might say something like, hey, the question you're asking or the information you want, that's something I was not trained on, so I don't know. So what we can do by combining the models with the database is that we can make the apps that you're building stateful. So you can basically, regardless if you're creating agents or search applications or those kind of things, you can basically inject the data into the models. And that is one of our focus points, right? So we want people to be able to create critical AI native applications, right? So that means production cases end to end. So quick recap, right? So we're talking about weaving the database and the models together. The open source nature allows us to create a community of customers and users that can range from open source to bring your own cloud to SaaS, serverless, what have you, focusing on secure, explainable, stateful AI applications. So a little bit about Weaviate. So Weaviate is a database. So from a starting point, you can import any type of data, right? Ranging from text, audio, images, whatever you have, you can store it in Weaviate. As you can see in the middle, is represented as a JSON object. We have these optional factorization modules. You can use them. You don't have to use them. So they integrate with the models from Hugging Face, from Google, OpenAI, Cohere, whatever you want to use. You can integrate with Weaviate if you want to. You can also bring your embeddings yourself if that's what you want. So really depends on use case. And we have these um, factorization modules, and we have these generative modules. We also have re-rankers and those kind of things. So if you want to build that end to end and you don't want to care too much about where the embedding is coming from or how you're integrating with the models, you can optionally do that in Weaviate as well. So there's one place where you store that, so you don't need a secondary database. You can just have one database and your data and your vector embeddings. And the majority of applications are around search, generation, and recommendations. So again, quickly to recap, so we have serverless SaaS, and we have bring your own cloud. That brings me to the demo. So I quickly want to give a demo of how Weaviate works. What I'm about to do is I'm showing something based on an Airbnb data set. This data set is also open source available on our website. So if you want to play around with it yourself, you can do that too. And the language that I'm going to show it in is going to be GraphQL. You can use Weaviate with Python, with JavaScript, and all these other clients. But this is like a generic language, how you can interact with the database, and for everybody, that's easy to read. So what we're looking at right now is a demo instance that we have, and this demo instance has these Airbnb listings in them. So one of the things that we can do, we can say, get, we can say listing, and then we can list all the listings that we have in the database. So as you can see here, we have here host name John, Clean and Quiet Apartment, Kingston, the price, and the room type. Now, what you might notice with all these listings is that all these individual listings do not have a description. So the description is null everywhere. And the reason it's null everywhere is because we simply do not have that information. So the original data set does not include this information. So one thing that you can do in Weaviate, so let me limit this to the first result. So here you see the first result. One thing that you can do in Weaviate is that you can pipe the result through a generative module. So you can say additional, generate, and then we're going to say single result. And then we say single result. We give that a prompt. And then we can give a prompt how we want to pipe these results through a prompt. So I prepared something for that. So let me paste it in. So what you can see here, it's a prompt, right? So this is like, write a short Airbnb description for the listing name. So that refers to this name. This is like include the name of the host. So that's here, host name, and so on and so forth. So by running this for this specific use case, we use the OpenAI endpoint. So what you see is that it basically returns here a single result where it created a description for this listing based on the input data. However, what you can also see now is that this single result is still not set in the description. So one of the things that we can do is that we can kick off basically a RAG application where we're going to say, store the single result in the description. So if we remove this, and I've just kicked this off in the background. So if you now run this same query again, what you will see is that now the description, do you see it, has the generated content in that. And what we did by storing this back into the database is that we can say additional vector. So the vector representation that got added to this, as you can see here, is based on the generated content. And what can we do with that? Well, we can do things like this. So we can now do a vector search, and then so place in near dog, right? And if I now run this query, here you go. We get back a result, a vector search result based on the query. So in this case, the East Harlem apartment, right? And oh yeah, and it says like located by Central Park, hence the that it makes that relation to park to walk my dog. So what you've seen here is that we've stored all these data objects. We've done a form of RAG by piping the results through a generative model. We stored that generative model back into Weaviate, and now we can do vector search over these results. This data set can be found on the Weaviate website. This concept is, we call it generative feedback loops. So that is a combination of a retrieval augmented generation and vector search. So if you just search on a website for generative feedback loops, you can find it yourself. You can find the data set. The complete data set, including Weaviate, is open source available. so you can play around with it yourself, or you can use the Weaviate cloud service as I just did, where you don't have to run the database yourself if you don't want to. So that was my demo about Weaviate. Feel free to reach out to me on bob@weaviate.io, or just go to the website weaviate.io where you can start using the database. I'm looking forward to see what you will be building or to hear from you. Thank you so much.